Hey friends, so I am here to tell you about my in-depth analysis of Evil Dead. Really what we're going to be talking about here is kind of Evil Dead, the future of Evil Dead, how Evil Dead Rise can tie into that, and what I think it means sort of for the future of the franchise. Also reviewing a bit how Evil Dead Rise ties back into things that have already been established and what I thought of that as someone that is an Evil Dead fan.
Groovy.
So we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritties here, so join me. We're talking spoilers, we're talking everything. I don't know if you can spoil a horror movie. I don't think you can spoil this movie, so I would say don't be too concerned about spoilers for this one. If you want to stick around, if you haven't seen it yet, please feel free. If you don't, totally cool. Do spoilers exist in horror? For you, they do, and I respect them. All right, let's jump into it. So, Evil Dead Rise is a, I would say, perfect horror movie. I would say, yeah, pretty perfect in terms of what you want from a horror film. It is scary. It is haunting. It looks amazing, which honestly, you don't even really need that, I don't think, from a perfect horror film. It doesn't have to look amazing. That's like bonus. This looks more good than I think it even needs to look in my mind. Yeah, it's exciting. It can keep you guessing. It makes you feel a lot of emotions. That's what horror does for me, and this really delivered. I think the thing that I also really loved about Evil Dead Rise, I kind of talked about it in my initial reaction video, which I did right after coming out of the movie, just fresh thoughts. But just talking about, I felt like the representation of the characters was a little bit more diverse. Now, as I've had a few weeks to digest this and also gone online and saw what other people are saying, there were some people that actually felt these characters were all very shallow and they didn't even care about any of them. I personally didn't feel that way, and I'm curious how those people felt about Evil Dead, the first remake, which happened, you know, about 10 years ago, 2013, 2014. I'm kind of curious to know how they felt about those characters and if they were attached to them. I personally thought these characters were great. I hope we get to see more of them. That's the only thing that I feel like is a little bit disappointing, is it kind of just feels like they're doing these one-off stories, and I'm wondering how they'll link back together, if they'll link back together, and what that'll look like. Because yeah, they always introduce me to characters that I'm like, that's a cool character, and then either they die and I'm like, well, there they go, or they do stick around, but I feel like I never see them again, because we have like Ash versus the Evil Dead, we have the Evil Dead 2013 remake film, and we also have Evil Dead Rise. And at the beginning of Evil Dead Rise, they even kind of play a little bit with the trope of, well, Evil Dead, these kids go out to a cabin, terrible stuff happens. I love that open, and I love sort of that callback to the franchise. I think that's super cool. I loved that. I was like, wait, I thought this was going to be about like a family in like an apartment or something. That's what it looked like from the... And I was like, where are we going with this? And then I love how that was just the introduction to sort of how we got here. And almost like this is a virus that can be spread is kind of what it comes back to at the end. It's kind of like it's like a closed loop, this movie, which I thought was very fun and very, I don't know, it's just a cool, fun little play on the trope and an acknowledgement to like, yeah, this is Evil Dead. This is what we do. We know what we do. Also brutal. Just a brutal, like the whole scalp thing, and with the drone. Ugh, there's some really gross, great, horrifying, like gory things that happen, body stuff, and lots of good little moments that you're just like, I don't like that. That's not fun. But in the way that it's so fun, because you can't, you either can't look away or you can't open your eyes, and not opening your eyes is always worse, because the sounds as well in this film, the sound in this movie is amazing. Let's talk about the record player, actually. Let's talk about that. Speaking of sound, wow, that was such a cool idea, them playing the records and then the records like don't stop playing, and it's kind of becomes like this Pandora's box of like, do we finish the records? And I loved how, I believe before this was kind of a callback to Evil Dead 2, where they kind of had to like finish the incantation in the recordings. I think that was part of it.
It's only been a few hours since I've translated and spoken aloud the first of the demon resurrection passages from the Book of the Dead.
But this time that doesn't work. I like how it delivers us a lot of the Evil Dead moments and Evil Dead tropes, but it doesn't fall into the trap of being like, yeah, and so this will happen again, because you know this is, we're retelling the story. Woo-hoo-hoo. They're trying to bring something fresh to it, and I appreciate that. And it's not in a way that derails everything, although we need to clarify some rules in Evil Dead, guys, because there's some horror rules in here. There's some horror rules in here. I don't know what the rule is. I'm confused. I need help. Help me, Sam Raimi. Because, okay, we'll get to that in a second. Let's finish about these records. But that idea of playing with the trope was very cool. And the book was amazing. I already talked about that in the initial reaction video, but I just want to rehash that. That book design is perfect. The pages, the level of detail that went into that book. Who made that book? That person on that props department, whoever's making that and drawing all those things, I don't know, but that person deserves something, an award, something. That person did an amazing job. So whoever made that book, thank you if you're watching this. I doubt you're watching my little video, but thank you. All right, let's talk about the rules though. So there are some tropes that obviously they play with and things that they themselves have established, and I loved that. I thought that was so fun to flip it and play with our expectations and just offer us like a fresh, sort of what I felt like it was a fresh story, but still very much in the same vein. However, how does this thing pass to people? Because I feel like I've seen everything from like, oh, you know, it's just something that like infects you and then it can infect other people, or if you get killed then you can come back, or I don't know, sometimes people just turn and you're like, why is this person turning but that person isn't? There was stuff in here where we were talking about after Uptown Duck and I, the trope, the rule of usually if you've been harmed by a deadite, you kind of become a deadite. However, that's not always the case. There are obviously people that have escaped this, such as Ash, who did get infected and cut off his hand and was able to keep going. However, they don't really establish like this person is... It doesn't feel like anyone's established as being the exception. And yet, the main character, Beth, the main character, her and Ellie, I would say, are the main characters, both of them. Just Ellie's the villain and Beth is, you know, the survivor girl, the hero of the story. Beth is, does get hurt. She gets stabbed through the hand. I think she gets grated. Some things happen to her, and so she is injured, but she doesn't get infected. But then the kids get injured, they get infected. And I'm just wondering, like, is she supposed to be the new Ash? Is that what we're establishing in this story, that like Beth is the exception character? Is there always one exception character? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe someone, but then I guess Ash has been that person, so Ash isn't in this movie. Maybe that's why. I'm still trying to figure out how that rule works, and I feel like it's not very clear, and I don't know if this breaks the rules, because some of these rules, I don't even know what we're really doing with them. So if you feel like you have an idea of a more clearly defined rule and some points where you can back up, like this is where it's happened, please share with me in the comments, because I'd love to discuss further sort of the moments that we recall and what we think that means. So that was my only real qualm with this one, I guess, was some of the stuff seems a little unclear, but I am very curious to see where it goes, and I'm curious to see if this is building to something. Also, something I did want to talk about, the future of Evil Dead. So let's talk about this. So I was just reading an article online. I'll put a link in the video description. It's from MovieWeb. And this article is basically just talking about how Well, I mean, I'm reading it on MovieWeb, but really I think the original article is linked here. I think it was AV Club that did it originally. So AV Club had an interview with Sam Raimi, Ivan Raimi, his brother, and Bruce Campbell, who are the trio that are kind of heading Evil Dead as it continues to give us films and projects. And their new plan, obviously it's been a while since we had an Evil Dead film. It was 2013, it's now 2023, it's been like 10 years. So their plan is actually to bring out a new Evil Dead movie every 2 to 3 years, which I think is actually a pretty good plan. I don't think you're gonna oversaturate the market with what you're doing. 2 to 3 years is a good amount to aim. It means you can also put the work in. And the other cool thing is that, so Sam Raimi, although there are elements of his style of filmmaking, I would say, in this, he did not make this movie. I mean, he's involved in the process, but he's not the director here. So the interesting thing about both this and the other Evil Dead film, the remake, is that we're taking on new sort of younger directors. So Lee Cronin actually directed this one, and it looks beautiful. Like, this is a really great looking movie. Like, dang. And I think that it could be really cool as well if they're putting together basically this Evil Dead Bible, as they call it, where they're going to have a plan for people so they can actually give it to the filmmakers and the people they have come in to make these movies to show them sort of what they're thinking of for Evil Dead. So it gives them sort of the control over the general idea of where everything's going so that it also is cohesive, and I'm assuming ideally at some point will all come together and something will happen with it. But at the same time, it also gives your filmmakers the freedom to bring their own style, do something new, and just offer you like a bit of a different vibe. And that's what I think I really loved about Evil Dead Rise. This was still Evil Dead, but it was a bit of a different vibe. Also, that hallway scene is horrific. The idea of just looking through this peephole, the way they made the apartment feel as though it was much bigger than it is. I love stuff like that because it's so scary. Even though someone's just in the other room, you feel like they're miles away. You feel like all of these characters are somehow alone in a very small apartment where they're together. And that is impressive because obviously being in an apartment, even if you're trapped there with something that's a monster, that's a deadite, if you're there with other people, it's less scary, right? Like a lot of the times there's safety in numbers. So if we have other people around, there creates this sense of security, which I guess sometimes I did have, but then I felt like maybe the sound or just the way things were shot, it took me into a place of isolation, which is impressive. And obviously there's also the external isolation of being up above the ground level. You can't get down, you are isolated. So they added in that, but they didn't stop there. They actually focused on each scene that happens individually where people get infected or get all messed up. Oh, the part where, what's the character's name? I want to make sure I say their name. This is important to me because I did really like these characters. So I want to do right by them. That part where Gabrielle Equals' character, she plays the daughter, Bridget, the older daughter, is eating like glass. That is horrifying. That and the cheese grater for me are like a couple of the worst moments. And I know there's a wood chipper in this, and I know there's also people having their hair ripped off, their scalp ripped off, but yeah, that was like the worst for me. That was the worst for me. Just all of these individual moments where people are losing control and having these fights with this force and getting infected. And I love how it just makes you feel like there's no help. Like they're just isolated when there's a person in the other room. I just go, excuse me, I think something's going wrong. But I was so drawn into that. It was like I couldn't even imagine. So it's very good at creating that atmosphere. And I will also say it is very good at spooking me because I have had some sleepless nights because of this movie. So if that isn't a testament, I don't know what is. I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope you also enjoyed it. That's my in-depth look into this one. Let me know what you think of the idea of there being a new Evil Dead movie every 2 or 3 years. Are you into that idea? Are you here for it? Are you a fan of Evil Dead? Are you a fan of Evil Dead, but you think, we don't need that? Let me know in the comments. I personally, I'll be there. But if you won't be there, you can let me know, because I want to talk about it. All right, friends, stay nerdy and stay safe. Watch out for deadites. They're coming.